And so here we are, it's Mental Health Awareness Week. We are Feedr. So a quick introduction to Feedr if any of you aren't sure who we are, what we do. But we essentially make it easier for people to get access to great, healthy, high quality food in the workplace. So we're a marketplace. We work with around 150 of the best vendors in London at the moment, who produce fresh on site every day, use fantastic ingredients and produce well-balanced meals. And really our goal is to make it easier for individuals to get access to these well-balanced meals on a daily basis, and that we do that through delivering into the office. So really we're there to support individuals and make it easier to be healthy, but actually also we're there to support businesses as well, and really make it easier for businesses to support their individuals, because I think, as we know, kind of healthy employees makes happy employees, makes productive employees, makes successful businesses. So really it's about kind of supporting the whole ecosystem, and really about kind of encouraging and facilitating healthier practices on a daily basis. So that's where we come from. I think kind of the link between nutrition and mental wellness is still kind of an emerging area of research. There's still a lot that we don't know. But I read recently in, I think it was a report by the Mental Health Foundation. I'm going to just read off just so I don't get it wrong. But I thought it really kind of hit the nail on the head. It's one of the most obvious yet under-recognised factors in the development of mental health is nutrition. I think that really kind of hits the nail on the head of what we're going to be exploring today. And so joining us today, we've got the fantastic Dr. Heather from Unmind, and then fantastic Luxey from our RA group and Compass group. So I'll hand over to those guys in a minute to do kind of proper intros, and then we'll dig straight in. But I think just a first bit of housekeeping, we have the Q&A function up, so we'll be talking probably for about half an hour, but we'll just see how it goes. We have the Q&A function up throughout, so if you do have questions, then definitely feel free to just pop them on there, and if they're kind of relevant to what we're talking about, then and there we can pick them up as we go, but we'll also do a Q&A section at the end. But what we'll also do, we've got the brilliant Floz on hand from Feedr as well, and she'll be managing kind of the Q&As at the end. What we'll do is launch the raise a hand function, and we'll also allow people to unmute themselves. So if you do have a question and actually you want to get involved in the discussion and ask us rather than just typing out on the Q&A section, we'll open that up. So if you do have a question, just click the raise your hand button just to let us know that you do want to ask something, and then Floz will facilitate that and we'll get you guys involved and keep it really engaging and chatty throughout. So over to the panelists to do your quick intros first, and then we'll dive straight into the good stuff. Heather, do you want to go first?
Sure. So hi everyone, I'm Heather. Thanks for having me here today. It's really good to be here. I'm a clinical psychologist and I work at Unmind. If you're not familiar with Unmind, it's a workplace mental health platform. So we have lots of digital tools and solutions to help people look after their mental health. And it's interesting, Charlotte, you mentioning that 1 in 4. We're really focusing on the 4 in 4, that we all have mental health all the time. We all have minds, and nobody's exempt from mental health kind of dipping. In fact, it's really normal for it to fluctuate. So we really focus on a preventative, proactive approach, and really encouraging everyone to look after their mental health every day, almost as you would your dental health. Like we all brush our teeth every day. So really we should all be doing things for our mental health every day as well. And because we go into companies, a big part of our mind is also just about making mental health part of that conversation, part of company culture, that is something that should be talked about, not kind of hidden away. So yes, we're very much just trying to make mental health sort of everyday conversation, something we all need to start talking about a bit more.
Absolutely. I love that 4 in 4. I think that's really powerful, really important. It's something that could affect any of us at any time. So I think that's brilliant. Great. Luxey, over to you.
Hi everyone, my name's Luxey, and again, thank you for having me on the panel today. So I work as a senior nutritionist for Restaurant Associates, who are part of Compass Group UK and Ireland, and we are a food service contract catering company. So we work quite closely with a number of our clients as well as our own employees on how best to approach a food offer within their sites. So we look at nutrition being fundamental in the food offer we develop, so working across our culinary teams, our marketing colleagues, as well as our procurement teams, to make sure the actual produce and products we procure into the business fit and align with our business priorities, as well as public health agenda. So we do have a big responsibility as quite a large contract catering company on the commitments we sign up to with government. So from a regulations perspective, looking at things such as sugar reduction, calorie reduction, and all the holistic approach of nutrition. And I suppose in light of Mental Health Wellness Week, we do play a part in terms of looking at the whole picture. So I think, like you said, rightly, Charlotte, I suppose, nutrition is very much underrated, so much that can actually make such a big difference to mental health as well as physical health. So it's actually going to be really interesting discussion, I think, today on how much of a role nutrition can play, and perhaps how much more education is needed, but also how we can actually integrate this within workplaces, which is something we definitely advocate within our business.
Yeah, absolutely. I fully agree. I just want to check if people are able to see our just before we do jump in, because I think it's always better when people are able to see exactly who's talking. So I don't know if anyone wants to just pop in the Q&A section, whether you can or not, please do. But then we'll carry on. If not, Floz, yeah, maybe let's put back on that screen sharing, and then we'll get the gallery view up. There we go. Hopefully everyone can see exactly who's talking now. Brill. Okay, so let's dive in. I think that was a really good point, actually. Luxey, to kind of jump off from. So yes, we know that kind of the role of diet in supporting mental well-being and also preventing mental illness is kind of yet to be fully explored. But I guess a great starting point is, what do we know right now? I think recently there's been a term, the gut-brain axis, has been kind of bandied around quite a bit, so that would be great to explore. But kind of more generally, what links do we know, or even as well, I think broadening that out to what do we know about mental well-being itself. And there's a lot more being spoken about right now, and I think it's being studied a lot more. So let's just explore that to begin with.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think you're completely right in terms of nutrition, and I suppose supporting good mental health. There's an abundance of research to suggest the sort of main sort of core principles, I suppose, of the diet that you can focus on. So things such as your carbohydrates, maintaining a steady energy source, so in terms of glucose, and where you get your carbohydrate intake from. So maintaining steady levels of energy throughout the day to help support good cognitive, memory, concentration functions. And then a big area is your B vitamins. So looking at actually, if you have any sort of deficiencies in certain B vitamins in particular, that play a really strong part in your cognitive development. And a lot of your B vitamins you're able to find from a diverse, varied diet. So inclusion of lots of different types of fruit and veg, some meat, poultry, dairy, and nuts and seeds. So it's really interesting. There are already very strong links, I suppose, in terms of the evidence in these particular areas. And then looking at your minerals, so things such as zinc, iron, selenium, definitely a lot more interest, I'd say, in selenium and the research being done at the moment to show the implications it can have in mental health disorders. But again, I suppose the main thing with nutrition, it's looking at as a whole diet. No single one ingredient can have the answers to everything. And I think that's where it's quite key, especially working as a nutritionist myself. It's always trying to explain it's the whole diet approach. So it's no one solution fits all, one supplement, etc. It's how best can you support in having a well-rounded diet. And a lot of those key principles really go back to the Eat Well Guide, which is the government's sort of recommendation on what we should be striving for. So if you are able to look at increasing your veg, having your good fats, so omega-3 fatty oils, things such as that, as well as then the other complement to that, I suppose, alongside nutrition is then exercise. So it's looking at the bigger picture. But I think what you touched upon about our gut microbiota, which really fascinating area and really exciting, I think, in the world of nutrition and science, because it's being connected to so much. There's so much research out there at the moment, and every day it's almost you hear something new and you read a new article or new research paper on exactly what are the new links associated with our gut microbiota. So with our gut, I guess the gut-brain axis that you rightly touched upon, I guess researchers now almost quite clear cut to say that there is a two-way communication system that happens between our gut and our central nervous system, and how that in fact actually influences our brain. So in terms of hormone regulation, sort of strengthening our immune system, all sorts of interactions that happen. But it's still a very emerging new field of research, like you said. So for every sort of research studies that show that things such as probiotics might in fact have a positive effect on mental health outcomes or improving those indicators, there's still equally the same amount of studies showing no effect at all. But what I think is quite interesting in that research is looking at the effects of a Mediterranean diet. So there was some research that was done, I think it was a couple of years ago now, where it looked at an intervention study of adapting a Mediterranean diet to a group of individuals who were diagnosed as having depression. They did have mild to moderate levels of depression. So I suppose it's taking the research as looking at the sample size that was used. And they did an intervention over about 12 weeks, and they used the dietitian to lead those interventions along with the diet. And then another group had just the dietitian, just to make sure it wasn't having that social interaction with a dietitian that was influencing any findings. And I suppose at the end of that, they found that the group that did in fact adopt the Mediterranean diet did in fact almost go into remission of their depression. However, what's probably worth noting is they were still on baseline medication. So it's almost just it highlights, I suppose, the role nutrition can play, but equally that it's not a standalone cure for any type of condition as that. Absolutely. So exactly how it can interact, but perhaps I think it just shows how powerful it could be of looking at nutrition right at the early stages of before the onset of sort of clinical mental health disorders, and actually how it could help from a preventative state, but also for overall well-being. So combining that with good exercise, good sleep, and holistically how that whole diet approach could quite possibly help with good mental health generally.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the point you touched on there with the gut-brain axis and how our brain speaks to different parts of our bodies, actually the fact that the gut almost speaks back to the brain and can influence kind of whatever's going on in the gut, then influences what's going on in the brain, is such a powerful one, and really speaks to exactly kind of what we're talking about, right now, and what needs to be explored.
Absolutely. And I'm sure, Heather, you'll probably have some insight on this, of that entire sort of complementary, how nutrition can be complementary to in terms of recovery, but also before the onset, but in terms of combination with other types of therapies as well, I'm sure.
Yeah, so Heather, I'd love to hear about it from kind of your field of expertise and what's been going on over the last year and 2 years with the research that you're finding, and how that's impacting kind of what's being spoken about more broadly.
Sure, and I really like you're sort of thinking holistically as well, like thinking, about diet and exercise, and really as human beings, like we're pretty complex really in terms of what makes us us. Like we've got our kind of the biological bases, like the things that we sort of inherit genetically, but also just our sort of physical states and how we respond to illness and our metabolism and all these things. Then we've got our psychological makeup, which is our personality, how we cope with distress, all the sort of individual differences. And then we have all the social stuff, so the relationships we have in our kind of peers and families, and like our wider environmental context, including like our work and where we live and the culture around us. Like there's so many things that kind of sort of come together to make us ourselves, and we've all got different makeups, like a fingerprint really, and when you sort of think of that sort of kaleidoscope, and you think of all the different areas that you need to sort of influence or work on to impact your mental well-being, it's a lot, and I think
it must make that really hard because of that, to run tests as well, and to run these experiments to see, because as you were saying, it's so multifactorial that it must make it a lot harder.
Yeah, and at Unmind, we're not so focused on research. I mean, that's one strand of us. We want to research basically kind of what works for people using our platform, but we try and help users understand their own sort of mental health. and we've sort of developed a measurement tool, and we've identified sort of 7 pillars in a way. So that includes things like your moods, your anxiety levels, but also things like how well you're sleeping, how kind of healthy you're feeling in your own body, but also things like how fulfilled you feel in your wider life. And fulfillment, I guess it's like how much you're sort of growing as a person, how optimistic you feel, how valued you sort of feel in your life, and then social connection as well. So, you know, the quality of the relationships you have and how much sort of support you have. So it's complex. I think, you know, and there's so many different factors that are then sort of swimming around together to kind of impact our mental health. And another thing just to say about mental health is, if you can imagine like a spectrum, you're at one end, you know, you're kind of at your best, you're really thriving, you're flourishing, everything's great, and then at the other end, you're feeling pretty bad, you maybe have quite a serious mental health problem, and the majority of us are just somewhere along that spectrum. And we'll move like day to day, week to week throughout our lives. We'll move up and down that spectrum, dependent on a variety of things, partly the things I talked about, sort of biological, psychological, social stuff, but also like external events, things like that. So it's, yeah, like now that, you know, and we've noticed people using our platform are more stressed, particularly since lockdown hit, people are more stressed. They feel that they're not coping so well, and people are valuing their health a lot more as well, which is quite an interesting paradox, I suppose.
Yeah, very much so. I think, yeah, perfect segue there. I think given the fact that we've got this kind of line and this spectrum as you've described it, and we're kind of generally hovering somewhere in the middle, and we can kind of sway either way. Given the situation we find ourselves in with lockdown and the pandemic, what can we as individuals, I guess, let's start at the individual level and then we'll kind of work up to businesses and beyond. But individually, what can we be doing to support our own mental well-being at this point, you know, at this point in time? I think more broadly, but then specifically kind of on the nutrition front. I know you've already touched on a few of those points, Luxey, with kind of varied diet, etc. But yeah, let's start kind of with broader ideas for mental well-being, and then we'll jump into the nutrition.
I mean, there's loads. I could probably talk for about 3 hours on this topic. I think.
What have you found has been most powerful from the feedback that you've had from your customers recently?
I think people, I mean, it varies, and I think on an individual level, it sort of depends, you know, are you working, and are you working from home? Are you working, you know, kind of out in public, and do you feel that you're kind of a bit more at risk there? Are you on furlough, have to be made redundant? Like there's so many, I feel like everyone is fighting their own battle, and the battle.
I guess with that, stress and anxiety and kind of feeling anxious is almost like a leveler, isn't not the way to say it, but kind of it's a universal emotion, isn't it? Kind of regardless of each person.
Yeah, exactly. Like everyone's kind of got a different reality, but it's all kind of underpinned by coronavirus. And there's still a lot of uncertainty that we've been, for the last 2 months or more, we've been having to sort of tolerate this uncertainty, and that is it, as humans, like we find uncertainty very hard to tolerate. We find it threatening. We don't like it. It's kind of inbuilt that we don't like uncertainty. So I think, you know, when you have uncertainty, you can do 2 things. One is you can try and get certainty, and definitely a lot of people try to do that by consuming lots of news or worrying lots and imagining all the kind of worst outcomes, which we know kind of feeds anxiety. And the other way to deal with uncertainty, which is much more difficult, is to sort of accept it, just accept the uncertainty, accept that, you know, we don't know when lockdown will end, we don't know what it'll be like when sort of things return to the way they were, And once you sort of give yourself permission to accept that uncertainty, it is actually really helpful, because you free up a lot of that headspace that you were using to worry. So that's one big thing, and it's certainly something that a lot of us have in common, this sort of uncertainty. A lot of people are finding that their mood is really dropping at the moment, and I guess there's lots of reasons for that. Some very obvious ones, that, you know, we're kind of, a lot of our freedom has been taken away. Our daily routines, we're not seeing our sort of friends and family the way we usually would. So, and these are a lot of things that tend to keep our moods quite level. Like we need this balance of sort of seeing people and having fun and doing things that give us a sense of purpose and value. So it's trying to find ways, whatever your circumstances, it's trying to find ways to keep up with those things. So obviously keeping connected, trying to keep routine. If you are working from home, really trying to keep work separate from home as much as you can. But in that realm as well, it's like giving yourself a break. And, you know, it's very easy to sort of say, oh yeah, you know, I'm going to be locked in my house for 12 weeks. I'm going to become like a yoga master, or learn Spanish, or, you know, learn guitar. And I feel like a lot of people are giving themselves a really hard time for not aspiring to these kind of, you know, ridiculous expectations. These kind of, you know, it's perfectly reasonable to just watch Netflix and like catch up on, you know, series you haven't seen. Like, you don't have to hold yourself to these like amazing goals for lockdown. In the same, like, you know, we've talked a lot in Unmind within our team about working from home, that, you know, we use this phrase, oh yeah, I'm working from home, and actually it's that you're trying to work in home under very unusual circumstances, often with children or other people around, and that's difficult. It's not the same as your sort of conventional working from home. So we've talked a lot in our team just about giving yourself a break, and, you know, if you're not that productive, don't beat yourself over the head for it, and don't try and overcompensate. It's a big part of looking after your mental health just now, in particular, is just like being nice to yourself, being compassionate, and managing your expectations. That this is a really weird time, and there's a lot of external stuff that makes it more difficult.
Yeah, that definitely. It really resonated, your point about over-consuming news. I know definitely I was one that was guilty of that, over-consuming the news and over-consuming sugar to begin with as well.
Yeah.
I think that was definitely kind of my go-to comfort. So Luxey, come in and talk to us about kind of the nutritional side of things.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're completely right. I think to what Heather said, it's very individual. It's very different circumstances everyone will find themselves in now. And I think from a sort of nutrition and cooking perspective, we've actually found, especially across our business and employees who are at home who possibly have some more time on their hands, having the opportunity to do more scratch cooking. I think there was a stat that came out that actually said the number of sort of veg boxes that are being ordered and have massively increased. So it's really interesting to see actually customer behaviour. And I think those who actually do have the opportunity to use it to actually do some more cooking, experimenting with ingredients that they've never perhaps used before, nor I guess equally been quite time poor to be able to spend that much time in the kitchen. And people who have young children around as well, it's a great learning opportunity to start teaching some of those real good, your sort of foundations of good nutrition and how you actually put a meal together. But equally, I think those who are working, find themselves working at home, you might equally have flipped your really good habits that you might have had once before to really bad ones, and some sort of mindless snacking's massively increased as well, that we found since lockdown period. And I guess it's just trying to make smarter choices. So if you are someone who does find you are snacking a lot more now that you're spending a lot more time at home, trying to have better snacks in front of you, so things like nuts and seeds, rice cakes, oat cakes, and just having it prepared and having it near your workstation, so it's a lot easier to reach for, and things such as fruit instead. So it makes it a lot quicker to make those decisions, as opposed to reach for something like exactly like you mentioned, Charlotte, of your sort of high fat, sugar, salt snacks instead. And the healthier alternatives of those will obviously help you sustain your energy levels throughout the day, and it will help you be more productive as well. But another good point around that is hydration. Hydration is something that is often overlooked as well, especially if you are spending long periods at home. You might find you're not doing much, so actually you're not going out to keep yourself hydrated, or you think, well, actually I'm just sitting at a desk all day, I don't need to. But it's so important to replenish your fluid levels, and even something as low as 2% in dehydration can have a massive impairment in your cognitive function and your memory. So it's really important to make sure that you keep hydrated. And as a nutritionist, I always love to say it's not just water. So it's something that people often forget about, that teas, coffees, other beverages do in fact count. It's just being mindful of the extra sort of sugars that you might have in your teas or coffees. And if you are drinking other fruit juices or beverages, just being mindful of that sugar intake, and also portion size if you're drinking things such as smoothies. So hydration is definitely one to bear in mind, I'd say. And also just, I suppose, using it as an opportunity to experiment and try a variety of different foods and grains, pulses, beans, legumes. All of those are great plant-based protein sources of fiber, and it's a great way to add a lot more of that diversity we spoke about in your gut microbiota. So great way to enhance the bacteria and the good bacteria and the diversity of that. So it's just trying to make those choices.
Definitely, great point on that. We run a partnership with Dr. Megan Rossi of the Gut Health Doctor. Anyone who's not aware of her, she's a fantastic dietitian, and she does a lot, obviously, as the name says, around gut health. And one of the things that she mentioned actually that really stuck with me, and I do try to keep to that, is try to aim for 30 different plant-based foods a week. So if you think throughout your week, if you have an apple on a day and then an orange, that counts as 2. Nuts and seeds are a really good way. If you have nuts and seeds on your cereal or your breakfast porridge, that's another way of getting more plant-based and different types of food. And she was really hammering home the importance of variety. You know, it's fantastic if you're having dinner every night and your side is broccoli, but if you're having broccoli every single night, yes, broccoli is very healthy and, you know, high in vitamin C, but actually there's a real importance to variety as well, which I think is almost maybe easier now we're at home. I don't know about anyone else, but I used to cook dinner, but I'd have my breakfast at work, I'd get my lunch from Feedr. We were lucky enough to have subsidised lunches when we were in the office, still doing it in a slightly different way now. But it meant I was cooking kind of once a day, but now we're at home cooking 3 meals a day. Actually, I found that my food waste has drastically dropped, which means I'm able to get more variety, and it's a lot easier. So rather than having that pack of, or that broccoli head which lasts me over kind of a few nights, actually, because I'm cooking a lot more, I'm able to get a lot more of those varieties in. So I definitely think that's something I've been kind of, aside to the increased sugar intake, it's definitely something that I've been conscious of and trying to aim for that 30 a week, and I think that's quite a good piece.
Yeah, no, I think you're completely right. I think especially habits, we are creatures of habit, so it's very easy to get stuck into a routine, like you say, where your breakfast is exactly the same, whether that's 7 days a week or 5 days a week. So it is very key to try to incorporate new different types of breakfast opportunities, as well as different types of foods, which is a lot easier said than done when you are stuck in a routine and it's your go-to. It's a very simple meal to prepare. But definitely in this lockdown period, I think a lot more people are experimenting. We as a business have definitely used a lot of our chefs in the business to do lots of live cook-alongs that our customers and clients can follow at home, just to help educate and help people with, you've all probably seen the craze of banana bread, sourdough, everything, but ways in which people can actually learn some new meals and recipes that they'll hopefully keep post this lockdown period as quick sort of dinner wins that they can have and to pull out of the bag when they need.
Yeah, brilliant. And I love that. That kind of brings us on to the next topic. I want to start talking about the role of businesses. So kind of should businesses, given the situation that we're in, kind of we talked about it from the individual perspective, but should businesses have, you know, a responsibility to not only kind of nurture their employees' mental wellness, but actually nurture that through good nutrition practices? So Heather, over to you to start that one. Kind of what is the role of businesses within this space?
I mean, I think when it comes to mental health, businesses really woken up in the last couple of years. I guess there's a sort of economic argument, there's an economic case that, you know, if somebody ends up being off sick with depression or anxiety, that obviously that there's a cost, there's an economic cost to business, and there's a lot of evidence to show that, you know, for every kind of pound that a business invests in prevention, they get back £6 or £7. Like they're huge. And if your employees are happier, they're more engaged in work, they're more productive, and work is just a nicer place to be. And I think there has to be a responsibility on businesses to contribute to that. Like, you know, we all in normal circumstances, we're in the office for 8 or 9 hours a day. That's where we spend most of our waking hours, and that's where kind of mental health problems often show themselves first. But it's also a really good place for employees just to be investing in prevention, but also in providing more reactive support when people need it. So I think, yeah, I think there's a huge case for it. It's hugely important, and I think particularly now with coronavirus, mental health is being talked about so much, and it's almost like the one good thing to come out of this is that it's mental health almost achieving parity with physical health now, that employers are recognising actually we need to and we want to look after our employees' mental health, and then they're asking us, how do we do that? what do we do? And that's when it comes to, I guess, thinking about what works for your own workforce. And, you know, do you need like digital solutions like Unmind? Do you need kind of in-house stuff, in-house support? Is it more about sort of training your staff? Like a lot of companies have sort of mental health champions who are really well versed in mental health and talking about it. Is it about equipping your line managers to have more open conversations? And for me, I think it's like all of these things. And you know, if I were to build a company, or anyone were to build a company, I think it's really important to build a culture that is like psychologically safe, or feel they can talk about mental health. And even if you're working in a really kind of fast-paced environment and long hours, you can still support and nurture people's well-being. And I do think nutrition does come into that as well, in terms of sort of what you provide and how you talk about food, and I'm sure Luxey has plenty to say on that.
Definitely. I love that you're right, there are kind of two sides to the coin. There's this prevention element, so breaking down those taboos, creating a culture where it feels safe to be able to talk about that, but and also other things. I think psychological safety kind of a business and of a company culture covers so many areas that there's that prevention element, and I think absolutely that's where the nutrition comes in. And then there's kind of alongside that this immediate treatment or support as and when it's needed. And it's not to say that businesses should be doing all of the above, because I think it can feel perhaps slightly overwhelming sometimes for something that is a new area for many businesses and for many HRs or whoever it is that's overseeing these sorts of areas of the business. But I think breaking that down into that initial prevention and then treatment is quite a nice way of initial segmentation, and then looking and exploring beyond within each of those areas what you can do. And I don't think it needs to cost the earth either, really. You know, obviously there are some fantastic end-to-end solutions that you can plug in, which might kind of be more of an expense, but for those businesses that don't necessarily have huge budgets to look at this, there are, I think one thing that I do think is quite interesting is how can you take the kind of individual, you know, really basic individual elements and bring that into the workplace, or at the moment not the workplace but into people's working time at home. And I think one of those absolutely can be and should be nutrition. So yeah, Luxey, over to you on that front. You already said, you actually mentioned earlier, didn't you, that you're doing at-home cook-alongs. I think that's really fantastic. So what else are you guys doing to explore that area?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, as a business, yeah, we take the mental health of our employees very seriously, and especially, I guess, being in the hospitality industry, more so, I suppose, a number of our employees, it's not something that is spoken about, and there is still somewhat that stigma attached to it. So we've also partnered with Hospitality Action, which is a charity that were helping to lead out a sort of mental health program with, and they help, exactly like Heather mentioned, train some of our staff in terms of mental health first aiders, but also raise awareness and equip a lot of our line managers with the tools in order to how to approach this with their teams, because for a lot of them it's just not part of the culture. And like you said, it's something that wasn't really spoken about, and especially in the hospitality industry, all different types of workers in terms of casual staff, catering staff, and back of house, front of house teams, that it's just trying to make sure everyone is equipped to deal with those conversations. So we do value that quite seriously, and as part of that, I guess our whole sort of wellness program, that is what we're starting to develop as on the back of that, which sort of happened sort of pre sort of COVID-19, but it's just now there's a massive need for it now, more so. And like you said, in terms of cook-alongs that our chefs have been doing for our clients as well as customers, anyone to follow from at home. And then we've also been doing a series of different webcasts to do with nutrition, mindfulness, exercise, just trying to talk to people about some everyday habits that they can try to incorporate, or even if someone just wants to tune in to actually listen to some advice or actually ask some questions, it's always a great avenue to actually, you can talk to your nutritionists that work within your company, and things that I think a lot of employees perhaps don't necessarily know that they have access to. So it's just a great forum for us. And on the back of that, we're just trying to develop, I think, like you said so rightly, traditionally before, I suppose, all of this, where people were spending a lot of times in their offices, a lot of their meals were actually consumed in the workplace, almost a third. Obviously, it will be interesting to see what happens now post COVID-19, but as an employer, we definitely feel we have a responsibility to play a part in this and provide our clients with some of these solutions of a good, healthy food offer that's also easily accessible. And I think that's what's important here, of making it accessible for everyone to be able to reach. So whether actually looking at technology solutions, I know Charlotte, we're working with yourselves in terms of click and collect services and how we actually get those food offers to people in whichever way is possible now, but also being able to deliver that whole piece of actually the nutrition that comes hand in hand with that. What exactly are they consuming? What are some of the benefits of the meals that they're going to be consuming from us? And linking that into mental health and almost having it ingrained as this is just normal, this is what it is, as opposed to having to make it this is unusual, which I think now everything is changing. And like Heather said, that tide has changed. Public health, national strategies, everyone's probably seen the public health mental health campaign, Every Mind Matters. There's definitely a lot more focus, and you see a lot more of it than you would before. And I think as employers, everyone has a part to play in that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, 100%. I think there's been a sea change, hasn't there, since the coronavirus outbreak, especially, I would say. And I wonder if nutrition is going to become increasingly a part of that conversation as well. How are we going to fight this thing if we have a nation of, high rates of obesity and diabetes and, other diseases kind of linked to poor nutrition and lifestyle choices. So I do think there's going to be an opportunity that really nutrition is going to, there's going to be a lot more around that and the impact of what we're eating on our physical and our mental well-being as well. At the point you said about sharing resources, I think there are so many kind of very knowledgeable professionals out there and experts out there. I know, I mentioned obviously earlier the gut health doctor, Dr. Megan Rossi. She has a fantastic book, and that kind of really breaks down and makes it very simple to follow kind of how your gut health can impact all areas of well-being. I think another one is Dr. Chatterjee. I don't know if other people have heard of him, but he is a GP, but he has very much kind of moved into more holistic, multifaceted approaches to well-being, which we've been talking about on this webinar so far. And he's a really interesting one. He's got a really good podcast called Feel Better, Live More. That's it. And there are a couple specifically on nutrition, which are really interesting. So if you are interested, then definitely check that out. And I think even sharing those things with your employees, that's a basic free thing you can do, that whilst we're kind of in this strange limbo before we're still figuring out what our new normal looks like, whether we will be going back to work or whether lots of us will be continuing to work from home for the foreseeable. I think there's stuff that we can do right now, sharing those those free kind of experts, and I think even you mentioned the veg boxes, maybe it's a case of sending a list of these are the veg box delivery options in your area. I think it's just about facilitating and making it easier for individuals to make the right choice for them. So it comes back to that kind of not overcomplicating it right now, but kind of we're all individuals within this, and how can we facilitate it and make it easier for us as individuals. And then there's this whole discussion on kind of moving forward, what does that look like, and kind of what role businesses play into the future as well, which I think is a really interesting one. And actually even beyond that, what role does the government play? You mentioned Luxey, that Eat Well is the government's kind of underlying policy, isn't it, at the moment? So yeah, what are your thoughts on that? Do you think that needs a revamp, or kind of tell us more?
Yeah, so the Eat Well guide is the government's guidance on what sort of we should look for in terms of recommendations on what a healthy balanced diet looks like. And I guess in terms of public health, the agenda, yeah, definitely. I think, like you said, it's definitely right up there in terms of priorities, which is, I think, quite exciting for myself as a nutritionist. I know the rest of our nutrition team are really excited to see nutrition sort of leading the way, and hopefully a great opportunity, like you said, of actually how do we get those messages across, but actually how do we change to also make sustainable changes, I suppose. So it's long-lasting behaviour. I think one of the things that's come out of this is it's great where there's been positive change, but will it last? And that's what, in terms of health and the implications of looking at reducing the risk of, diabetes, heart disease, all of the sort of modifiable risk factors which do relate back to diet. How can we make these lasting changes? And yeah, in terms of government strategy, it's something they are looking at, and I suppose trying to reinvigorate this whole piece. But also the other side, I suppose, that we haven't really touched upon is sort of the food inequality piece that the National Food Strategy has kicked off again to start looking at this. And that's definitely something that's on the back of COVID, obviously always did exist, but I think now has been brought to the forefront of actually accessibility, affordability to everyone. So everyone has the right accessibility to healthy, nourishing food. And I think that's very vital if we're looking at it from a population basis and as a national strategy.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a really good point to touch on. Heather, I wanted to ask, obviously, kind of your work with Unmind, you work directly with businesses to help support their employees' mental well-being, and therefore kind of, I assume the suggestion is that these businesses are kind of actively thinking about mental well-being and mental health because they're using your service. What are your experiences with them kind of beyond that? Do you know kind of what any of their broader strategies are and what else they're doing to support their employees? I'd love, your kind of first line of working with these guys, so I'd love your insights on that.
Yeah, I think there's a lot going on, and it varies by sort of population and structure. I guess, one of our sort of first big companies was John Lewis Partnership. So they have,
they do a lot around their wellness.
They do. They're really, really good. And they've got, people in stores and head office, drivers. They've got a really diverse workforce. I think they have always really looked after their workforce. Like, they were early adopters of Unmind. They have lots of wellbeing champions internally. And they talk about mental health. Mental health is very visible in the company, which I think then sort of makes it easier to speak up, and there's not really any stigma. Centrica, so that's, if you think of kind of sort of gas engineers that come and fix your boiler, and they do so much more. Centrica are a big company. They've got a very holistic approach to well-being, so similar to what we talked about in the beginning, like they sort of see mental well-being as part of a bigger package in a way, and yeah, they sort of interweave all their messages, sort of combining mental well-being with other aspects of well-being. William Hill, they're very good. They're a global company that take they just get people talking. They provide sort of collateral and comms to get people talking about mental health. So there's a lot, and I think our client base is, so many different industries, like law firms, banks, retail, and everyone is sort of looking inwards to see what are the needs within their organisation, making sure there's something that fits, and then looking to see like what is there. Yeah, I think, you know, every company we work with is really like taking a real interest in the mental well-being of their workforce, and really looking to do something good.
Brilliant.